I still remember the sound of the train that morning, the way its whistle cut through the fog like a cry from another world. I was 42 then, standing on that dusty platform with a heart too young for my age, waiting for a man who said he'd come back for me. His name was Samuel, and his promises were as sweet as the wind that carries spring after a long winter. He had kissed my hand before boarding, eyes full of dreams, voice trembling when he whispered, "Just a few months, Elise. I'll come back richer, better. You'll see." I had smiled, foolishly perhaps, believing that love could wait out time like the stars wait for dawn. I watched his train disappear into the horizon, never knowing it was also taking my future with it. That platform became my altar of hope. I visited every week, always the same time, always the same dress. The people in town began to talk, calling me the woman who waits. But I didn't care. I had faith in promises, and I believed in the weight of a man's word. My daughter June was only 18 then, full of laughter and mischief. She used to tease me gently, saying, "Mama, you'll be old and gray before that man shows up." I would chuckle and brush her hair back, saying, "Love doesn't count the years, darling. It counts the heartbeats." Years did pass, and I did turn gray. The train station became quieter, the benches older, the paint peeling, and yet I still went, because somewhere inside I thought maybe that's what true love was. Not fire or passion, but waiting without bitterness. I didn't know that love could rot when it's left waiting too long. Then one summer afternoon, June came home with a sparkle in her eyes. She said she'd met someone, a kind man, older than her, but gentle. She spoke his name softly, and my heart stopped beating for a second. Samuel. At first I thought my mind was playing cruel tricks. Maybe there were two men with that name, I told myself. The world was wide enough for coincidence, wasn't it? But when she described his smile, his voice, the way he told stories about faraway places, I knew there was no mistake. My Samuel had come back, but not for me. That night I sat by the window long after June went to bed. The moonlight poured across the floor like cold milk, and I sat there staring at my reflection in the glass. The lines on my face looked deeper, the silver in my hair brighter. I whispered to myself, "You're an old fool, Elise. He came back, and you're no longer the woman he left." The next morning Samuel came to our home. When I opened the door, time folded in on itself. There he was, older, tired, but still carrying that same voice that once made my heart tremble. He froze when he saw me, eyes widening like he'd seen a ghost. "Elise," he breathed, almost in a whisper, you haven't changed much." I smiled, but it wasn't joy that curved my lips. It was something else, something sharper. "And you," I said quietly, "have changed just enough." We stood there in silence, the air thick with ghosts. June's footsteps broke the moment. She came running, wrapping her arms around him, laughing. "Mama, this is Samuel, the man I told you about." He looked at me over her shoulder, his expression crumbling for a moment. I could see the storm behind his eyes, guilt, confusion, maybe even regret, but he said nothing, not a word, and I understood everything in that silence. He had returned, yes, but not for the woman who had waited half a lifetime for him. He had come for my daughter, my reflection, my youth reborn. The world spun around me, slow and cruel, as June's laughter filled the house like sunlight. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed his promises, every tender word, every dream he had sold me under the stars. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or broken things. Sometimes it arrives in the form of two people laughing in the next room, a sound too soft, too human to hate. Days turned to weeks. June's affection for him grew, and Samuel played his part well, charming, attentive, almost fatherly. But whenever our eyes met, something inside me burned. Not rage, not jealousy, something worse, pity for both of us. One evening, as the sun melted behind the trees, he asked to speak with me. We stood by the porch, the world painted in amber light. Elise, he said, voice trembling, I never meant for this to happen. I thought you'd moved on. I thought, you thought wrong, I cut in. You thought love was something you could bury and dig up when convenient. He lowered his gaze. I didn't come here to hurt you. But you did, I said softly. And the cruelest part is, you won't even admit it. He opened his mouth, but no words came, just silence, that same silence that had once been filled with promises. Then June came out smiling, holding his hand. Mama, Samuel asked me to marry him. For a second I couldn't breathe. The world blurred, and all I could hear was the faint sound of the train whistle echoing in my memory, the one I'd waited for all those years. I smiled, though my chest felt hollow. That's wonderful, darling. June threw her arms around me, full of innocent joy. Oh, Mama, I'm so happy. And I held her tight, my daughter, my only light, while staring over her shoulder at the man who had once been my future. He looked away. That night I cried for the first time in years, not for losing him, but for realizing how blind love can make you. Because the man I waited for never came back. Only his shadow did. I didn't sleep that night. The air inside the house felt too still, like it was holding its breath along with me. I sat by the window again, the same place where I used to wait for his letters, the same place where I had counted sunsets and reasons to keep hoping. Now the moonlight fell on the empty chair beside me, and I whispered to it like a fool, You came back, Samuel, but not for me. The crickets outside sang softly, unaware of the ache that filled the walls. My daughter's laughter drifted from her room, light and careless, the way youth always sounds when it doesn't know what it's breaking. Have you ever felt love and pain breathing in the same heartbeat? That feeling where joy for someone you love twists into sorrow for yourself? Tell me in the comments, my dear listeners. Would you have told your daughter the truth, or would you have kept it buried to protect her smile? The next morning, June was humming while making breakfast. The scent of pancakes filled the air, warm and sweet, but it made me sick to my stomach. Samuel sat at the table, his hand brushing hers as she poured his coffee. Every little gesture between them felt like needles under my skin. He looked up once, met my eyes, and quickly looked away. I wanted to scream, to ask why he came back, why he didn't tell me sooner, why he let my daughter fall in love with my ghost. But my voice betrayed me. I simply nodded, served myself tea, and sat down as if we were all part of some cruel play written by time. June talked about wedding colors, flowers, the future, things I used to dream about. She didn't see the tremor in my hand as I lifted my cup. Samuel noticed, though. His eyes followed every small movement, full of guilt, maybe even shame. After breakfast, he offered to fix the old fence outside. I watched from the porch as he worked. The sight of him in my yard again, the same place he once promised we'd build a life together, made memories claw their way back. I remembered how he used to laugh, how his hand once fit mine like a secret we'd never tell. Now every hammer strike sounded like the cracking of an old promise. When June went to town for errands, Samuel approached me. His face was pale, his voice low. Elise, he said, I'll call off the wedding if you tell me to. I looked at him for a long moment, trying to find the man I once knew. And break my daughter's heart? I asked quietly. No, Samuel, that kind of pain doesn't heal, and I've already carried enough of it for a lifetime. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. I thought I was doing the right thing back then, he said. I had debts, responsibilities. I didn't think I was good enough for you. I almost laughed. So you left to make yourself worthy and came back to marry my child instead? That's your redemption? He flinched. I could see the weight of his own choices eating him alive. I didn't know she was your daughter at first, he said. When I met her, she told me her mother's name was Elise, but I didn't believe it could be you. You were old, I finished for him. Yes, time does that to people who keep waiting. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy as stone. Then I said softly, "You owe me nothing now. Just make sure you don't lie to her." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away. That night I sat by my old sewing machine, the one I'd used to stitch dreams into dresses long ago. June's wedding gown lay folded beside me, white lace, fragile like innocence. I ran my fingers over the fabric, wondering if she'd ever forgive me if she knew the truth. When she came in later, glowing with excitement, she knelt beside me. "Mama, he's such a good man. I know you'll love him once you get to know him better." I smiled faintly. "I already do, child, in ways you can't imagine." She giggled, not knowing what my words really meant. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know, Mama, I think love is all about timing. Maybe you never met the right one at the right time." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "Maybe, sweetheart, or maybe love came too soon and stayed too long." After she went to bed, I stared at the half-sewn gown and thought about the strange cruelty of fate. How it circles back with familiar faces, giving you what you wanted, just too late, in the wrong way. The wedding was set for spring. Flowers would bloom, people would dance, and I would smile while my heart quietly turned to ash. That night, as I closed my eyes, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let my bitterness poison her happiness. I would be her mother, not her ghost. But deep inside, a small, sharp voice whispered, "You can't bury the past, Elise, not when it's sitting across your table." The weeks rolled by like slow-moving clouds, heavy and silent. Every day brought them closer together, and every night pushed me deeper into my thoughts. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt like it was holding its breath. I moved through it like a ghost, smiling when spoken to, cooking, cleaning, pretending to be fine, pretending to be anything but the woman who was slowly disappearing. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. It just settles quietly in your bones until it feels like part of your body. That's what it became for me. A quiet ache, a memory I could never put down. Sometimes I caught Samuel watching me when June wasn't looking. His eyes carried the same question mine did. What have we done? But neither of us dared to speak it aloud. We were both too deep in this web of silence we had woven for ourselves. Tell me something, my dear listener. If you were me, would you have told her the truth? Would you destroy her illusion to save your own heart, or let her walk into a lie, believing it was love? One afternoon, I was hanging clothes under the warm sun when I saw June and Samuel walking toward the lake, the same lake where he once promised to build me a home. I watched them from afar, their laughter carrying across the water like music. It broke something in me, not because of jealousy, but because it reminded me of the girl I used to be, full of hope and foolish faith. I walked back to the porch, sat down, and picked up my journal. My hands trembled as I wrote. He came back, but not for me. Maybe that's the way love works. It always finds its way home, even if it's to the wrong door. The next few days were filled with wedding preparations. The townsfolk came by with gifts, advice, and gossip. Everyone admired how happy June looked, how lucky she was to have found such a devoted man, and every compliment felt like a small cut against my skin. One evening, while June was out with her friends, Samuel came into the kitchen. I was kneading dough, the flour soft between my fingers, when he stopped in the doorway. "Elise," he said quietly, "we can't go on like this." I kept working, not looking up. "Like what?" "Pretending," he said, "pretending that none of this matters, that what we had meant nothing." I pressed my palms against the dough harder. "You made your choice, Samuel. You can't stand here in my kitchen, in the home I built from the pieces you left, and talk about what could have been." He stepped closer. "I didn't choose her to hurt you. I didn't even know." I looked up sharply. "You didn't know she was my daughter?" Then why did you look so pale when I opened that door the first day you came back? He said nothing. I shook my head. You knew, Samuel. You knew, and you stayed anyway. Maybe because she reminded you of me. Maybe because you wanted to fix your guilt. But love built on guilt always breaks. He took a deep breath. I'll leave if you want me to. I stared at him for a long moment. And what will that fix? She'll still wonder where you went. She'll still ask questions I can't answer. You'll break her heart, and I'll be left to pick up the pieces again. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, Elise. I never wanted it to end like this. I wiped my hands on my apron and turned away. It ended a long time ago. You just came back to remind me how deep the wound still is. He left quietly, and I stood there alone, staring at the flower-covered table. I could hear my heartbeat, heavy and uneven. Somewhere outside, the wind shifted, that strange whispering kind of wind that sounds like someone calling your name. Later that night, I found June sitting on the porch, looking worried. Mama, she said softly, Samuel seems distant. Did I do something wrong? I wanted to tell her everything, to take her hands, look her in the eyes, and say, he once loved me the way he loves you now. But instead I smiled faintly. Sometimes men get quiet when they realize how much they have to lose. Give him time. She nodded, trusting me completely. That trust, it broke me more than anything Samuel had ever done. The next morning, I went into town to clear my head. I stopped by the old train station, the one where it all began. The benches were new now, the paint fresh, but the echoes of the past still lingered there. I sat down, closed my eyes, and listened to the sound of a distant train rumbling through the hills. For a moment, I imagined him beside me, young again, eyes filled with that same promise. I whispered into the wind, You kept your word, Samuel. You came back, but you came back too late. When I opened my eyes, a tear rolled down my cheek, not of anger, not of regret, but of surrender. I realized then that love isn't about waiting. It's about what you become while you wait. And I had become a woman who survived. As I walked home, I decided something. I would not let this end in silence. Before the wedding, before any vows were spoken, I would confront him one last time, not as the woman he left, but as the woman who finally let go. I reached home just as the sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. June was on the porch, humming to herself, sewing ribbons into her wedding dress. She looked up and smiled. Mama, isn't it beautiful? I looked at her joy, and my heart cracked open again. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, I said softly, and I meant it, because sometimes beauty isn't in what you gain, it's in what you're brave enough to lose. The morning of the wedding crept upon me like a slow storm. The air was heavy, almost too still, as if even nature was holding its breath. I woke before dawn, not out of excitement, but from the kind of restlessness that only comes when your heart knows something terrible is about to happen. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the small wooden box on my dresser. Inside it were old letters, a faded photograph, and a single train ticket that had never been used. The ticket Samuel was supposed to hand me 60 years ago, the day he promised we'd start our new life together. I ran my fingers over it, the edges worn soft from years of remembering. 60 years. And still, his absence felt fresher than yesterday. When the sun began to rise, I went to the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, yes, but not weak. My hair was silver now, my hands lined with stories, but in my eyes there was still fire, maybe smaller, maybe dimmer, but still there. I whispered to my reflection, today you tell him the truth, no more ghosts, no more pretending. The ceremony was set in the church by the river, where the magnolias bloomed white and heavy. The whole town had gathered. I watched from the back pew as my daughter, my June, walked down the aisle in her ivory dress. She was radiant, glowing, a vision of the kind of hope I had once carried, and beside the altar stood Samuel, older now, his hair streaked with gray, his shoulders softer, but his eyes, they were the same eyes that once made my knees tremble. He looked at her with a tenderness I recognized too well, and as the vows began, the walls around my heart started to crumble. "Do you, Samuel, take this woman?" The priest's voice blurred. My hands were trembling in my lap. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to stop it all. But what right did I have? The truth would only destroy her. My silence, I told myself, was mercy. But mercy feels a lot like heartbreak when it comes too late. After the ceremony, the guests filled the hall with laughter and music. I stayed by the window, away from the noise, watching the river outside shimmer under the afternoon sun. That's when Samuel approached me. "Elise," he said softly, "can we talk?" I turned slowly. "You should be with your bride." He hesitated. "Please." We stepped out onto the porch, where the sound of the celebration grew distant. He looked at me with eyes that carried decades of regret. "I read your journal," he said quietly. I froze. "You what?" "I didn't mean to," he said quickly. "It was open on the table. I saw what you wrote about the ticket, about that day." I looked away, my chest tight. "That was not meant for you." "I know," he said, "but I had to tell you the truth, Elise. That day, I did come to the station. I waited until the last train left. But your father, he found me first." I blinked, confused. "My father?" He nodded slowly. "He told me to leave. Said you deserved more than a dreamer with nothing but a suitcase and a promise. He said if I loved you, I'd let you go. So I did. I thought I was doing the right thing." I stepped back, my heart pounding. "You left because of him?" His eyes filled with tears. "I thought one day I could come back, that maybe if I worked hard, made something of myself, I could find you again. But by the time I did, you were married. And then I met June. I didn't know she was yours until that day at your door." The world around me blurred. I felt dizzy, hollow. All those years, I had hated him, cursed him for breaking me. And now, to know it was my father who'd cut the strings behind the curtain, it was like being betrayed twice. I whispered, "All this time I thought you forgot me." "I never forgot," he said. "Every time I saw June smile, I saw you. I loved her, Elise, but not the way I loved you. That love, it never left." I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "Then why marry her? Why keep the lie alive?" He sighed, his shoulders heavy. "Because she reminded me of the life I lost. Because I was too much of a coward to tell her the truth. I thought I could live with it. But seeing you here today, I know I can't." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of laughter from inside. It felt cruel that the world could be so full of joy while my heart was collapsing. I took a deep breath and said, "You can't tell her, not now. She's built her happiness on the story you gave her. Don't take that from her." He shook his head. "She deserves the truth." "She deserves peace," I said, my voice cracking. "Don't do to her what life already did to me. Let her believe in love, even if it's made of glass." He stepped closer, tears streaking his face. "And what about you? Don't you deserve the truth too?" I smiled faintly, though my eyes burned. I've lived long enough to know that truth doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just reopens the wound. There was a long silence between us, the kind that holds all the words you'll never say. Then quietly I said I'd go back to her, Samuel. Be the man I wished you were for me. That's how you can make it right. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Goodbye, Elise. When he walked away, I didn't stop him. I stood there on the porch, feeling the weight of 60 years settle on my shoulders all over again. As the sun dipped low, the guests began to leave. June came out, her face glowing, her hand in his. "Mama," she said, "thank you for everything. This is the happiest day of my life." I forced a smile and kissed her forehead. "You deserve every bit of it, my love." And I meant it, even if it cost me everything. Later that night, when the house was quiet again, I sat by the window and opened my journal one last time. I wrote, "He didn't forget me. He just obeyed a promise he never made to me. Love doesn't always die because it fades. Sometimes it dies because someone tried to protect it too much." I closed the book and placed it back in the box with the ticket. Then I whispered, "It's done now, all of it." But deep inside, I knew it never truly would be. Because how do you bury something that's still alive in your memories? Tell me, dear listener, do you think love can ever really die? Or does it just learn to live quietly inside us, waiting for the next heartbeat that remembers? It's strange how silence changes with age. When you're young, silence feels heavy, unbearable even. But when you've lived as long as I have, silence becomes a friend. It sits beside you, listens without judgment, and lets you breathe in the things words can't fix. It had been nearly 10 years since that wedding day. June had moved away with Samuel, building a life in the city. They sent letters sometimes, warm, polite, distant. Each one felt like a photograph of happiness taken just out of reach. I never told her what I knew. I carried that truth like an old wound, hidden under the skin, aching only when the weather changed. The years blurred together, seasons turned like pages. My hair grew thinner, my hands more fragile. The house grew quieter with every passing year, the air filled with the faint ticking of clocks and the creak of old floors. One autumn evening, as the leaves turned to copper and gold, I received a package in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was delicate but unfamiliar. Inside was a small wooden box, the same kind I'd once used for my letters. My heart trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded note and the same train ticket I had once tucked away. My eyes widened. On the back of the ticket, written in faded ink, were the words, "I did wait, Elise. I just didn't know how to tell you." The letter beneath it was from June. "Mama, I found this among Papa's things after he passed. He told me everything before he went. He said he'd spent a lifetime loving 2 women, but only one had ever owned his heart. He wanted you to know that his greatest mistake wasn't leaving you. It was never coming back." My hands shook as I read those words. The room seemed to spin, my breath catching somewhere between grief and relief. I had spent a lifetime wondering why, and now at last I knew he had loved me. Not perfectly, not purely, but truthfully, and maybe that was enough. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "You came back, Samuel. Just a little late." Tears rolled down my cheeks, not of pain this time, but of release. The kind that comes when a story finally reaches its end, even if the ending isn't the one you hoped for. That night I sat on my terrace, the same spot where I used to wait for the postman, the same chair that had held 1,000 memories. The air was cool, the stars soft above me. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I closed my eyes and said softly, "Maybe love never really leaves us. It just changes its home." The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the faint scent of rain and memory. I imagined Samuel somewhere in that quiet beyond, smiling, free of guilt. And I smiled too, because even though time had stolen so much from me, youth, laughter, certainty, it couldn't take away the truth I now held, that I was loved, even if the world never saw it. So I sat there until the sky turned pale, my heart finally still. And as I tell you this, my dear listener, I have one last thing to ask you. If you've ever loved and lost, if you've ever waited for someone who never came back, would you still believe that love was worth it? Tell me in the comments, because maybe your story, like mine, still has something left to say. And if this story touched your heart, even a little, Don't forget to subscribe, to like, to share it with someone who believes in love that never fades, because sometimes the stories we tell are the only way our hearts stay alive.